Homecoming. The avenue of ancient oaks formed a verdant tunnel, their boughs a living canopy overhead. Sunlight fractured and danced across the Bentley's hood as Nicholas navigated the familiar lane. 15 years had elapsed since his last visit to Deo, a return deferred since his father's passing. A knot of grief, an uneasy anticipation tightened in his chest. Honestly, Nicholas, Isabel drawled, slicing through the oppressive quiet that had settled between them like cobwebs. Are you certain this place is even habitable? It projects an aura of antiquity. Nicholas shot her a sideways glance. Isabel epitomized contemporary chic in her cream ensemble and oversized shades, her flaxen hair sculpted to perfection. Beside her polished image, Deo's time-worn facade appeared even more stark, a fragment of a forgotten age. "It's home, Isabel," he replied, careful to mask the prickle of defensiveness. "It's been in the family for generations." "Darling, I'm aware," she responded, patting his arm with a flawlessly lacquered hand. "But historic doesn't automatically equate to habitable. I trust you've ensured the plumbing's up to par, at the very least." A nervous chuckle escaped Nicholas. "Mabel keeps everything shipshape. You'll see." Rounding the final curve, Deo unfolded in its entirety. The sprawling manor, crafted from weathered stone and cloaked in ivy, stood sentinel against the backdrop of undulating hills. A fountain chuckled softly in the courtyard, flanked by meticulously arranged gardens. Nicholas brought the car to a halt before the imposing entrance and switched off the engine. For a moment, he remained motionless, drinking in the scene. The fragrance of roses mingled with the earthy scent of damp soil, punctuated only by the twittering of birds. It was here he'd spent his boyhood, scaling trees, engaging in spirited games of hide-and-seek, and absorbing his grandfather's narratives by the crackling hearth. "Well," Isabel commented, disrupting his reverie, "it's certainly imposing." Her tone hinted at reservation. He emerged from the car and circled around to assist her. "Come on," he offered, extending his hand. "Let me give you the grand tour." As they neared the front door, it swung inward, revealing a woman with silver hair neatly coiled and a cordial smile gracing her features. Mabel. Her eyes, mirroring Nicholas's own cerulean hue, radiated warmth as she embraced him. "Nicholas, darling, welcome back." He returned the embrace, burying his face in her shoulder. Mabel had transcended the role of housekeeper. She had been his confidant, a maternal figure in the aftermath of his mother's death. "It's wonderful to be back, Mabel," he murmured, his voice tinged with emotion. Stepping back, he gestured toward Isabel. "Isabel, this is Mabel, who practically raised me." Isabel offered a cursory smile and extended a hand. "A pleasure." A subtle undercurrent of condescension colored her polite tone. Mabel clasped her hand, her grip surprisingly firm. "The pleasure is all mine, Mrs. Deo. We've been expecting you." Mabel ushered them inside, and Nicholas keenly observed Isabel's reaction to the entrance hall. The soaring ceilings, the elaborate chandeliers, the period furniture, a stark contrast to the streamlined aesthetic she favored. "It's intriguing," Isabel ventured, her voice carefully measured. "So much history." Nicholas cringed inwardly. He decoded the underlying sentiment. Old-fashioned. Obsolete. "My grandfather curated most of the collection," he explained, striving for enthusiasm. "Each piece has a tale to tell." "I'm sure they do," Isabel replied, her gaze drawn to a portrait of a severe gentleman in a powdered wig. "Perhaps we might inject a bit of modernity during our stay. I have several brilliant designers who could truly revitalize this space." A twinge of irritation surfaced. "There's no need for alterations, Isabel. It is my abode. I cherish it as it is." Mabel cleared her throat discreetly. "Perhaps Mrs. Deo would like to see her quarters? I prepared the master suite." Isabel's face lit up. "Oh yes, please. I'm rather fatigued from the journey." As Mabel escorted Isabel upstairs, Nicholas lingered in the entrance hall, a burgeoning sense of disquiet washing over him. He had harbored hopes that Isabel would appreciate Deo for its intrinsic value, a repository of memories and legacy. But it was becoming painfully clear that she perceived it as a mere canvas, ripe for renovation and realignment with her personal tastes. Retreating to the library, his father's sanctuary, he was enveloped by walls lined with leather-bound books and the comforting crackle of the hearth. Tracing the spine of a time-worn Moby Dick, memories flooded back of countless hours spent within these walls, his father's voice guiding him through the narratives. He sank into a leather armchair, the familiar aroma of aged paper and wood smoke enveloping him. He closed his eyes, attempting to summon the sense of tranquility he had always found at Deo. But Isabel's pronouncements lingered in his mind, her scorn for his ancestral home a discordant note in the symphony of reminiscence. A while later, Mabel entered bearing a tray laden with tea and biscuits. "Everything all right, Nicholas?" she inquired, her voice laced with concern. He opened his eyes and manufactured a smile. "Just a touch weary, Mabel. It was a long drive." She placed a tray on a nearby table and settled beside him. "What are your impressions of Isabel?" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "She's distinct," he offered finally, "accustomed to a different lifestyle." Mabel nodded slowly. "She appears particular." Nicholas exhaled heavily. "She's accustomed to getting her way. She'll adapt." Mabel reached out, her hand covering his. "Don't allow her to change you, Nicholas. Don't let her change Deo. This place is an integral part of you." He squeezed her hand in gratitude. "I won't, Mabel. I promise." Yet, even as the words left his lips, he knew the path ahead was fraught with difficulty. Isabel possessed a singular talent for achieving her desires, and he harbored a pronounced aversion to confrontation. Torn between his obligations to his wife and his profound affection for his ancestral home, he struggled to reconcile the conflicting loyalties. The following morning, the air crackled with tension at the breakfast table. Isabel barely touched her food, lamenting the dearth of organic choices and the atrocious coffee. Nicholas attempted to diffuse the situation, but his efforts only seemed to escalate her irritation. "Really, Nicholas," she declared, pushing her plate aside, "I fail to comprehend how you can tolerate living in such conditions. It's akin to a time warp." Mabel, silently serving, maintained a neutral expression. "It's not so dreadful, Isabel," Nicholas countered, striving for composure. "It's simply a different pace of life." "Different is a euphemism," she retorted. "Archaic is more apartment." Nicholas's eyes narrowed. "That's quite enough, Isabel. You're being discourteous." Isabel arched an eyebrow. "Am I? Or am I merely being candid?" The discussion rapidly devolved, voices escalating until Mabel delicately intervened. "Perhaps I might escort Mrs. Deo through the gardens," she proposed, her tone a soothing balm. "The roses are at their peak." Isabel considered the proposition, then nodded. "Very well. Anything to escape this oppressive atmosphere." Watching them depart through the window, Nicholas felt his stomach clench. He knew Isabel's comments had wounded Mabel, and he felt complicit for not mounting a stronger defense. Later, he discovered Mabel in the kitchen, preparing the evening meal. He approached her, resting his hand on her shoulder. "I apologize for Isabel's behavior," he said. "She doesn't intend to be offensive. She simply doesn't comprehend." Mabel offered a wistful smile. "It's quite all right, Nicholas. I've weathered far worse storms." He knew she alluded to his father, a man of formidable temperament. "She'll come to appreciate it," he said, attempting to project conviction. "She'll perceive the unique charm of this place." Mabel remained silent, her eyes betraying her skepticism. Nicholas recognized the unlikelihood of Isabel's transformation and understood he faced a pivotal decision. He could continue to appease her, jeopardizing his own contentment and the sanctity of his family legacy, or he could assert himself and defend his convictions. The weight of the choice pressed upon him, a constant reminder of the conflicting allegiances tearing him asunder. A warm welcome. The Bentley crunched to a halt on the gravel drive, the sound echoing in the sudden stillness after the long journey. Nicholas felt a familiar tightening in his chest, a mixture of grief and anticipation. He glanced at Isabel, her face a mask of studied indifference as she surveyed the imposing facade of Deo. Before he could even reach for the door handle, it swung open, revealing Mabel. Her face, etched with the gentle map of time, broke into a warm, welcoming smile. The sight of her was a balm to Nicholas's raw emotions, a tangible link to a past that felt increasingly distant. "Nicholas, dear boy, you're here," Mabel exclaimed, her voice a comforting melody that hadn't changed in all the years he'd known her. "Welcome home." She reached out and enveloped him in a hug, her embrace smelling faintly of lavender and beeswax, the very essence of Deo. Isabel remained in the car, observing the scene with a detached air. Nicholas, momentarily lost in the warmth of Mabel's greeting, almost forgot she was there. He pulled back slightly, remembering his manners. "Isabel, this is Mabel Ainsworth." "Mabel, my wife, Isabel." Mabel turned her attention to Isabel, her smile unwavering. "Welcome to Deo, Mrs. Deo. It's a pleasure to finally meet you." She extended a hand towards Isabel, who hesitated for a moment before taking it, her grip cool and fleeting. "Thank you," Isabel replied, her voice carefully neutral. As she stepped out of the car, she subtly wrinkled her nose, as if detecting an unpleasant odor. Her gaze swept over Mabel's attire. A simple, floral-patterned dress, a practical cardigan, and sturdy shoes. "My, what an interesting ensemble," Isabel remarked, her tone laced with a thinly veiled condescension. "So, period." Nicholas felt a surge of anger rising within him, hot and unfamiliar. He opened his mouth to say something, to defend Mabel, but the words caught in his throat. He glanced at Mabel, expecting to see hurt or indignation, but her expression remained serene. Mabel simply chuckled softly. "Well, dear, practicality is key in a house like this. There's always something to be done, and I wouldn't want to ruin a fancy frock on the dust bunnies lurking in the attics." Her eyes twinkled with a hint of amusement, as if she were sharing a private joke. Isabel's smile tightened. "I'm sure there are people for that sort of thing. Aren't there, Nicholas?" She looked at him pointedly, her eyes conveying a silent message. "Control your staff." Nicholas squirmed, feeling trapped between his loyalty to Mabel and his desire to appease Isabel. "Of course," he mumbled, avoiding Mabel's gaze. "We can discuss hiring additional help later." The words tasted like ash in his mouth. Mabel, sensing his discomfort, subtly changed the subject. "Let me take your bags inside. I prepared a light lunch for you both. You must be famished after your journey." She reached for Isabel's designer suitcase, but Isabel quickly snatched it away. "I'll take care of this myself. Thank you," she said, her voice sharp. She hoisted the suitcase from Mabel and proceeded towards the front door, her back ramrod straight. Mabel watched her go, her expression unreadable. Nicholas, filled with a sudden sense of shame, hurried to help with the remaining luggage. "I'm so sorry, Mabel," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. She didn't mean anything by it. He knew, even as he said the words, that they were a lie. Isabel's intention had been clear. Mabel placed a hand on his arm, her touch gentle and reassuring. "Don't worry about it, Nicholas. I've dealt with worse in my time. Just focus on settling in." Her eyes held a depth of understanding that both comforted and unnerved him. As they carried the bags into the house, Nicholas couldn't shake the feeling that he had already failed Mabel, that he had betrayed her trust by allowing Isabel to treat her with such disrespect. The grand halls of Deo, usually a source of comfort and pride, now seemed to echo with his own inadequacy. The house felt colder, somehow, despite Mabel's warm welcome, and the weight of his conflicting loyalties settled heavily on his shoulders. He could hear Isabel's heels clicking on the marble floor in the distance, a sound that grated on his nerves like nails on a chalkboard. He knew that the coming days would be a test, a battle between the woman he had chosen and the woman who had helped shape him into the man he was. And he was terrified of choosing the wrong side. Echoes of the past. "Let me show you around," Nicholas said, his arm gesturing wide, encompassing the mahogany-paneled hallway. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting kaleidoscopic patterns on the floor. He felt a familiar warmth bloom in his chest, a feeling absent during his years in sterile, minimalist apartments. Isabel's nose wrinkled. It's certainly large and dark. She ran a gloved hand along the wall, leaving a faint smudge. Dusty, too. Nicholas ignored the comment. He was determined to share the joy he felt being back. This way, he said, leading her toward the set of double doors. This was my father's study. He practically lived in here. The room was a cavern of leather and books. Floor-to-ceiling shelves overflowed with volumes, some bound in cracked leather, others with faded gold lettering. A large globe sat in one corner, its painted continents worn smooth from years of spinning. The air smelled of old paper and beeswax polish. Isabel surveyed the room with a critical eye. So much stuff. We'll have to get rid of most of this. It's terribly dated. Nicholas felt a pang. But these are my father's books. He collected them for years. Darling, darling, Isabel said, her voice dripping with saccharine condescension. We can donate them to a library, somewhere less visible. Think of the space we'll gain. We could turn this into a screening room or a yoga studio. He pictured his father, a man of quiet contemplation, surrounded by his beloved books. He imagined the yoga instructor, all bright spandex and forced cheerfulness, contorting in the space where his father had pored over ancient maps. The image felt wrong. I don't know, Isabel, he stammered. It's a big decision. Nonsense, she said, dismissing his concerns with a wave of her hand. I'll take care of it. You just focus on other things. He led her upstairs, hoping to find a room, a space that would resonate with her. He showed her the music room, with its grand piano and echoes of his mother's melodies. Isabel declared it too gloomy and suggested converting it into a walk-in closet. He showed her the solarium, filled with exotic plants and dappled sunlight. She complained about the humidity and suggested installing a tanning bed. Finally, he brought her to his favorite spot, a small, circular room at the top of the East Tower. He had called it his observatory as a child, though all it contained was a telescope and a comfortable armchair. The windows offered panoramic views of the surrounding countryside, stretching all the way to the distant sea. I used to come up here every night, Nicholas said, his voice soft with nostalgia. I'd look at the stars and imagine all sorts of adventures. I even thought I saw a UFO once. He chuckled, remembering the childish excitement. Isabel glanced around the small room, unimpressed. It's quaint, but utterly useless. What could we possibly do with this? Just enjoy the view, he said, his voice losing some of its earlier enthusiasm. Darling, views are best enjoyed from a heated infinity pool, she said, linking her arm through his. Come on, let's see about getting someone up here to measure for new windows. These are terribly drafty. As they descended the winding staircase, Nicholas paused, placing his hand on the cold stone wall. He remembered carving his initials into the stone when he was 10, a childish act of defiance against the rigid order of the house. He glanced back up at the small room, his sanctuary now deemed useless by his wife. Later, as they sat in the drawing room, sipping tea from delicate china cups, Isabel broached the subject of the furniture. The sofas are dreadful, she said, wrinkling her nose. All that chintz and those fussy little cushions. We need to replace it all with something modern. Something chic. Nicholas stared at the floral-patterned sofa, a sofa he had known his entire life. He remembered countless hours spent curled up on it, reading books, listening to his grandmother's stories, confiding in Mabel about his childhood anxieties. But it's antique, he protested weakly. It's been in the family for generations. Darling, antique doesn't equal stylish, Isabel said, taking a delicate sip of her tea. It equals old, and frankly, a little bit smelly. He closed his eyes, picturing Mabel, polishing the furniture with loving care, her hands moving with practiced grace. He imagined her face when she learned that Isabel planned to replace everything with something chic. Perhaps we could keep a few pieces, he suggested, his voice barely above a whisper. Just a few, for sentimental reasons. Isabel placed her teacup down with a sharp clink. Nicholas, darling, we're not running a museum. We are creating a home that reflects our status, our taste, our future. She reached across the small table and took his hand, her touch cold and possessive. Trust me on this. I know what's best. He looked into her eyes, those icy blue eyes that seemed to see right through him. He wanted to argue, to protest, to stand up for the memories that were woven into the very fabric of this house. But the words caught in his throat, choked by a combination of fear and a desperate desire to please. He squeezed her hand, offering a weak smile. Of course, darling. Whatever you think is best. As he looked around the room, at the familiar furniture, the portraits of his ancestors hanging on the walls, the echoes of his past seemed to fade, replaced by the cold, hard reality of his present. He had brought Isabel here to share his home, his history, his heart. But he was beginning to realize that she wasn't interested in sharing. She was interested in conquering. Dinner disaster. The dining hall echoed, a space designed to intimidate. Silverware glittered beneath the somber portraits of ancestors, their painted disapproval a palpable thing directed squarely at Isabel's sleek dress. Though Nicholas had known the room his whole life, a strange disquiet gnawed at him, as if he were a trespasser in his birthright. Isabel's appraisal of the table was withering. Honestly, darling, this china is prehistoric. It simply must be replaced. One expects to see it behind glass. Nicholas, pushing around his seared scallops, felt his gut clench. Mother was rather attached to it, he offered quietly. Mothers often cling to the appalling. Isabel breezed, swirling her Chardonnay. Imagine the gatherings we could orchestrate with a truly magnificent set. Picture the Moreau crest gleaming on pristine porcelain. He pictured only his mother, each plate meticulously polished, her hands a roadmap of time and love. It's perfectly adequate, Isabel, he countered, a sharper edge to his voice. Her brow arched, a perfect parabola of disdain. Adequate? Is that truly our aspiration? We aim for breathtaking, not bland. Mabel entered, the silver tureen of asparagus soup nestled in her hands. Her movements, always a study in grace, offered a small island of calm in the rising storm. She set the tureen down with a quiet dignity that implicitly chided Isabel's escalating pitch. "Thank you, Mabel," Nicholas murmured, shooting her a grateful glance. The warmth of her answering smile bypassed Isabel entirely. Isabel watched the soup being ladled, her expression a blend of condescension and amusement. Such quaint service. Don't you think, dearest, we should engage a professional caterer? Someone less emotionally invested? A sharp clink rang out as Nicholas's fork hit the china. The soup now tasted of cinders. Mabel is practically family, Isabel. She's been here since I was a boy. Isabel emitted a brittle laugh, a sound like shattering glass. Family? Nicholas, darling, don't be so provincial. She's domestic staff. Unflinching, Mabel presented Isabel with her soup. As she did, Isabel executed a swift, jarring motion, sending her wine glass tumbling. The crimson tide surged across the white expanse, leaving behind a gruesome pink scar. "Oh, heavens!" Isabel cried, her tone ringing false. "How terribly clumsy of me." Nicholas fixed on the spreading stain, nausea swirling in his stomach. This was no accident. He caught the glint of satisfaction in Isabel's eye. "Mabel," Isabel purred, the saccharine coating failing to mask the venom. "Be a dear and attend to this, would you? It's creating such a dreadful mess." Mabel's face remained a mask of composure, but Nicholas glimpsed a fleeting emotion. Was it wounded pride? Resignation? Before it vanished. With a mere nod, her movements giving nothing away, she acknowledged the request. "Of course, madam," Mabel replied, her voice unwavering. She turned to retrieve a cloth. "And do be quick, Mabel," Isabel tossed after her. "We wouldn't want the stain to become permanent, would we? Terribly inconvenient." Nicholas tracked Mabel's retreat to the kitchen, his fists clenched beneath the table's edge. He wanted to intervene, to defend, but the words seemed to catch in his throat a knot of anger, shame, and fear. He turned to Isabel, who was dabbing at her lips with a linen napkin, her gaze alight with malevolent triumph. "Isabel," he started, his voice unsteady. "That wasn't called for." She tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Whatever wasn't called for, my sweet. Accidents do befall us. I'm merely asking Mabel to fulfill her duties." "You know precisely what you were doing," Nicholas stated, finding a stronger resonance in his tone. "You deliberately upended that glass." Isabel released a theatrical sigh. "Nicholas, must you always amplify everything into a drama? You are as stuck in the past as this ancient house. Why can't we simply savor our meal?" "Savor," he scoffed, the word laced with bitterness. "You're deliberately attempting to belittle Mabel. She has done nothing to warrant this." "Oh, please," Isabel drawled, her eyes skyward. "Don't tell me you're still enthralled with your childhood wet nurse. She's merely a servant, Nicholas. Their purpose is to serve." "She embodies more than just a servant," Nicholas snapped back, his simmering anger reaching a boil. "She is woven into the fabric of this family. She raised me, for pity's sake. She warrants respect." Isabel's laughter was a frigid wind sweeping through the lofty space. "Respect? To lavish upon a mere servant? Spare me. Respect is a currency to be earned, not freely bestowed. And certainly not upon one who has existed solely to polish silver and dust-period furniture." With a violent scrape, Nicholas pushed back his chair, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "That is enough," he declared, his voice trembling with undisguised rage. "I forbid you from speaking of Mabel in such a disparaging way. She is inherently a better human being than you will ever aspire to be." Isabel's face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. "How dare you address me in such a tone? I bear the mantle of your wife, and I preside over this estate," Nicholas returned, his voice resonating with newfound authority. "And within these walls, we extend respect indiscriminately, including Mabel." He turned sharply and marched towards the kitchen, leaving Isabel alone at the table, her features a study in incandescent rage. He discovered Mabel hunched over the stained tablecloth, scrubbing with fierce determination, her shoulders conveying both exhaustion and acute humiliation. "Mabel," he began softly, placing a hand on her arm. "Leave it. I will manage." Mabel lifted her gaze, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Oh, Mr. Nicholas," she uttered, her voice quivering. "I'm so profoundly sorry. I should have been more vigilant." "It was not a failure on your part, Mabel," Nicholas corrected firmly. "Isabel intentionally committed that act." Mabel sighed, wiping her reddened hands on her apron. "I'm aware, sir. However, it holds little significance. I'm accustomed to such behavior." "It is of great significance," Nicholas insisted. "I shall no longer permit her to subject you to such treatment. You are deserving of far better." He took the cloth from her hands and began to scrub at the stubborn stain, his efforts clumsy and ineffective. After a brief observation, Mabel gently retrieved the cloth. "Allow me, sir," she proposed quietly. "I possess knowledge of the appropriate methods." As Mabel toiled, Nicholas remained at her side, a silent promise hanging palpably in the air. He knew instinctively that the skirmish had only just begun, yet, for the first time since Isabel's arrival, he felt the nascent stirring of hope. He was at long last championing righteousness, the individuals he cherished, and the ideals he held sacred. And he would not yield. The sharp, cleansing tang of lemon and vinegar diffused through the air, momentarily masking the underlying bitterness of the evening. The stain marring the tablecloth, however, like the burgeoning stain on his conscience, threatened to prove far more resistant to eradication. Servant, not family. The next morning, the scent of lilies, not Mabel's usual lavender, assaulted Nicholas's senses as he descended the grand staircase. Isabel had, he suspected, replaced Mabel's carefully arranged posies with something more ostentatious. He found his wife in the breakfast room, already halfway through a plate of perfectly arranged fruit. Mabel stood silently by the sideboard, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips as she refilled Isabel's water glass. Mabel, Isabel said, without looking up. The silver needs polishing. All of it. And the china in the West Wing display cabinet is dusty. See to it immediately. Nicholas winced. Isabel, Mabel has already prepared breakfast. Isabel finally looked up, her blue eyes glacial. And now she has other duties. We can't have dust bunnies accumulating, can we? This isn't some peasant's cottage, Nicholas. She gestured dismissively with her fork. Besides, I need someone to fetch the architectural plans from the study. The ones rolled up near the fireplace. You wouldn't want me to strain myself, would you, darling? Mabel simply nodded, her expression unreadable, and quietly exited the room. Nicholas stared after her, a knot forming in his stomach. He wanted to say something, anything, to defend Mabel, to soften the blow of Isabel's callousness. But the words caught in his throat, choked by years of ingrained politeness and a deep-seated fear of confrontation. Really, Nicholas, Isabel said, dabbing her mouth with a linen napkin. You coddle her. She's a servant, not family. The words hung in the air, sharp and cutting. Nicholas felt a wave of shame wash over him. He knew, deep down, that Mabel was family, more so than some of his own blood relatives. She had been a constant presence in his life, a source of unwavering comfort and support. To hear Isabel dismiss her so casually felt like a betrayal, not just of Mabel, but of himself. Throughout the day, Isabel continued her campaign of subtle but relentless degradation. She tasked Mabel with cleaning the rarely used conservatory, a sweltering glass box filled with cobwebs and forgotten ferns. She requested endless cups of tea, each prepared to her exacting specifications, only to take a single sip and declare it too weak, or too strong, or not quite the right blend. She criticized Mabel's cooking, her housekeeping, even the way she walked. Nicholas watched, paralyzed, as Mabel quietly endured it all. He saw the weariness in her eyes, the slight slump in her shoulders, but she never complained, never protested. She simply carried out Isabel's orders with a stoic grace that both impressed and infuriated him. In the afternoon, Isabel decided she wanted to rearrange the library. The books are all in such a dreadful order, she declared, wrinkling her nose. Completely illogical. Mabel, I want to take them all down and alphabetize them by author. Starting now. The library was vast, its shelves lined with hundreds of ancient tomes, many of them heavy and fragile. It was a task that would take days, perhaps even weeks. Nicholas knew that Mabel, at her age, couldn't possibly manage it without assistance. Isabel, that's a huge job, he finally managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. Perhaps we could hire someone to help? Hire someone? Isabel scoffed. Don't be ridiculous, Nicholas. Mabel is perfectly capable. Aren't you, Mabel? Mabel, who had been standing silently by the door, nodded. Of course, madam. Nicholas wanted to scream. He wanted to grab Isabel by the shoulders and shake her until she understood the cruelty of her actions. But he did nothing. He simply stood there, a silent accomplice to her abuse. As Mabel began to remove the books from the shelves, her movements slow and deliberate, Nicholas wandered out of the library, unable to bear the sight any longer. He found himself in the gardens, aimlessly wandering among the rose bushes. The air was thick with the scent of decay, a reminder of the fleeting nature of beauty. He sat down on a stone bench, his head in his hands. He felt like a coward, a weakling, a traitor to everything he held dear. He had allowed Isabel to come into his home and systematically dismantle everything he loved, and he had done nothing to stop her. Later that evening, as they sat down to dinner, the tension between Nicholas and Isabel was palpable. Mabel served them in silence, her movements precise and efficient, but Nicholas could sense a subtle shift in her demeanor. There was a quiet dignity about her, a sense of self-respect that Isabel's petty insults couldn't touch. The lamb is rather dry, Mabel, Isabel said, after taking a small bite, and the potatoes are under-seasoned. Nicholas clenched his fists under the table. The food is fine, Isabel. Are you questioning my palate, darling? She asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I'm simply saying that Mabel has always been an excellent cook. Perhaps her skills are declining with age, Isabel said, dismissively. Perhaps it's time we considered hiring someone more modern. The words hung in the air like a threat. Nicholas looked at Mabel, her face pale and drawn. He knew that losing her position at Deo would be devastating for her. It wasn't just a job. It was her life, her home, her family. He finally found his voice, clear and firm. Mabel is not going anywhere, Isabel. Isabel raised an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. Oh, she's been here longer than I have, Nicholas continued, his voice growing stronger. She's part of this family, and I won't allow you to treat her with such disrespect. He looked at Mabel, his eyes filled with remorse and gratitude. Thank you, Mabel, he said softly, for everything. Mabel's eyes met his, and for a fleeting moment, he saw a glimmer of hope, a spark of defiance. She gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod, and then quietly resumed her duties. Isabel, however, was far from finished. The battle lines had been drawn, and Nicholas knew that the conflict was far from over. Forgotten stories. A lingering fragrance of lavender and warm wax hung in the west wing, a ghostly reminder of Mabel's perpetual caretaking. Nicholas wandered through the rooms, his hand gliding over the lustrous sheen of the library's mahogany shelves. Childhood memories surfaced. Mabel's bedtime narratives, spun from brave knights and impish sprites, her voice a soothing melody in the darkened room. He could almost catch that familiar lilt now, a rhythm as calming as the ocean's breath. Pausing at the window, his gaze fell upon the rose garden. She'd painstakingly named each variety for him, patiently explaining the nuances of hybrid teas versus floribundas. A vivid image bloomed in his mind. Mabel kneeling among the thorny stalks, her time-worn hands deftly clipping withered leaves, a wordless tune humming on her lips. Countless hours she had devoted to these roses, nurturing them with the same quiet fervor she had bestowed upon him. A wave of mortification crashed over him. He squeezed his eyes shut, Isabel's scornful expression as Mabel poured tea, searing his memory. The sharp report of silver striking marble echoed within him. He'd stood frozen, a prisoner of misplaced courtesy, while Isabel's cutting remarks stung Mabel like a swarm of angry bees. He recalled the scarlet fever that had laid him low, his parents absent on business. Mabel had been his unwavering guardian. For days, she sat vigil, easing his burning brow with cool compresses, reading aloud passages from cherished books, coaxing broth past his parched lips. Nightmares clawed at him in his delirium, yet Mabel's presence was a steadfast beacon, a warmth in the surrounding gloom. He could still feel the slightly rough texture of the woolen blanket she'd draped over him. Inhale the delicate whisper of her rosewater, feel the tender weight of her hand on his forehead. But that incandescent devotion had been absent from Mabel's eyes today. He'd witnessed hurt, a profound, aching sadness that twisted the knife in his gut. And he, the boy she'd raised, her Nicholas, had offered no defense. He retreated to his old room, untouched for years. Faded blue wallpaper adorned with sailing ships peeled away at the edges. The painted rocking horse, chipped and time-worn, stood sentinel in the corner. His palm traced the smooth curve of its back, recalling countless imaginary voyages as a dauntless captain braving treacherous seas. Mabel had always ensured those adventures were safe ones. Each night, she'd tucked him in, drawing the covers snug to his chin, offering a silent invocation for his safety. He remembered the feel of her work-worn hands, the faint clean scent of lavender soap lingering as she smoothed his unruly hair. He sank onto the bed's edge, the aged springs groaning beneath him. He felt contemptible, a renegade to his own values. He'd permitted Isabel to belittle Mabel, to treat her as mere chattel, a soulless component of the Deo estate. He had betrayed the woman who had lavished him with unconditional love, nurtured him in his parents' absence, molded him into the man he was. He conjured a montage of Mabel's countless acts of kindness through the years. Freshly baked cookies left surreptitiously on his desk, hand-knitted scarves gifted each Christmas, the uncanny knack she possessed for eliciting laughter, even in his darkest moods. And how had he reciprocated? By standing mutely by as Isabel eroded Mabel's spirit, diminished her value, regarding her as a worn, unwelcome fixture. He rose abruptly, his fists clenched tight. He could no longer endure this internal turmoil. He had to intervene. He had to atone. He had to convey to Mabel his profound regard, his deep-seated respect, his enduring love. He knew resistance awaited him. Isabel would not yield easily to dissent, but he could no longer permit her to govern his actions. He had to establish a boundary, champion his convictions, safeguard those he cherished. He discovered Mabel in the kitchen, meticulously scouring already pristine countertops. Her shoulders slumped with exhaustion, her movements labored and precise. Her eyes revealed a profound weariness, a newfound resignation that chilled him. "Mabel," he began softly, his voice thick with remorse. She turned, her expression a blank canvas. "Yes, Mr. Nicholas?" The formality of her address wounded him deeply. She called him Nicholas since he was a toddler. The Mr. Nicholas was a shield, a wall constructed to protect herself from further pain. I wanted to beg your forgiveness," he stammered, his words stumbling over one another. "For everything." Mabel remained mute, her gaze fixated on the polished surface. "I should have spoken up," he pressed, his voice laced with desperation. "I should have defended you. I was wrong, Mabel, profoundly wrong." He reached out, his fingers brushing her arm. Her skin felt cool and parched beneath his touch. "Please, Mabel," he implored. "Say something. Tell me you understand." Finally, Mabel met his eyes, her gaze a complex blend of grief and absolution. "It's all right, Mr. Nicholas," she murmured. "I understand." But he doubted she truly did. She couldn't possibly grasp the depths of his humiliation, the magnitude of his treachery. An uphill battle lay before him to regain her trust. A monumental task was necessary to rectify the situation, and a profound certainty resonated within him. He would not rest until he had exerted every possible effort to mend the fractures he had created. The neglected narratives needed to be resurrected, not just for him, but for Isabel, for anyone who dared to demean the very heart of Deo. The grand party, the invitation, bearing an interlaced, contemporary emblem, was delivered to the surrounding estates that Tuesday. Isabel had held nothing back. A Midsummer Night's Dream she'd chosen as her theme. An ironic selection, Nicholas mused, given the thickening tension within Deo's ancient walls. Isabel, a flurry of activity, hummed a bright melody as she traversed the drawing room. Her shimmering, verdant gown whispered about her ankles. The caterers arrive tomorrow, the florist at dawn. A string quartet is booked, followed by a DJ. It will be magnificent, darling. Utterly magnificent. Nicholas, perched on the edge of a time-worn armchair, felt a constricting sensation in his chest. He observed her, a controlled whirlwind, transforming their ancestral home into a theatrical set. He hadn't encountered Mabel all day, avoiding her with a heart burdened by shame. "Oh, Nicholas, do cease looking so despondent. This is for us, for Deo, to revitalize its image. We must modernize, dearest, haul it into the current century." He forced a feeble smile. "And how does Mabel figure into your revitalization scheme?" Isabel's smile wavered for a fleeting instant, then rebounded, sharper and more artificial than before. "Mabel? Well, she's taking a well-deserved break, isn't she? All that cleaning and cooking must be exhausting. Mrs. Higgins from the village is now assisting with the general kitchen upkeep." Nicholas' grip tightened on the armrest. "Mabel always assisted at parties. She knows the house, the guests. She finds enjoyment in it." Isabel dismissed his concerns with a wave. "Darling, the caterers are fully equipped. They possess expertly trained personnel. We don't require Mabel bustling about, creating obstacles." Her tone sharpened, tainted with a condescension that grated on Nicholas' nerves. "Besides," she added, her voice softening, "I desire for her to enjoy the party. As a guest." The falsehood hung in the air, stifling. Nicholas knew Mabel would never feel like a guest in the abode she had devoted her existence to. He imagined her, sequestered in her humble quarters, the sounds of music and celebration seeping through the venerable stone, a constant reminder of her alienation. Later, he discovered Mabel in the rose garden, tending to the blooms. Twilight cast elongated shadows over the manicured lawn, and the air hung heavy with the aroma of moist earth and fragrant blossoms. He approached her gingerly, his heart hammering. "Mabel," he murmured. She straightened, her spine rigid, and turned to face him. Her eyes, typically so welcoming, were now guarded, holding a quiet sadness that wounded him deeply. "Nicholas," she responded, her voice devoid of emotion. He hesitated, searching for suitable words, but they proved elusive. "Isabel is planning a celebration," he began awkwardly. Mabel nodded, her gaze fixed on a drooping rose. "I am aware. She believes you deserve to rest, to savor the evening." Mabel's lips thinned. "Savor the evening," she echoed, her voice barely audible. "By remaining in my room, listening to the music, and pretending I don't exist? Is that her idea of happiness for me?" He winced. "She doesn't comprehend, Mabel. She fails to grasp how much Deo signifies to you." "And what about you, Nicholas?" she inquired, her eyes meeting his. "Do you understand?" He averted his gaze, unable to hold her stare. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken accusations and regrets. I apologize, Mabel," he stammered. "I should have intervened. I should have what?" "Nicholas," she interrupted, her voice rising slightly. "Confronted her? Defended me? This house? Your family's history?" He closed his eyes, the weight of his failure pressing down on him. I know I've disappointed you." Mabel sighed, a sound steeped in weariness. "It's not solely about me, Nicholas. It's about everything. This house, your parents, all the memories." She's attempting to obliterate it all. The following day, the house pulsed with activity. Caterers overran the kitchen, their pristine white uniforms a striking contrast to Mabel's familiar aprons. Florists constructed elaborate floral installations, transforming the formal rooms into a whimsical Eden. The air vibrated with the scent of lilies and roses, interwoven with the savory scent of canapes and roasted meats. Nicholas drifted through the chaos, feeling increasingly estranged. He caught a glimpse of Mabel only once, standing at the far end of a corridor, observing the flurry with an air of muted resignation. He attempted to approach, but she turned away, melting into the shadows of the ancient house. As dusk descended, guests began to appear, their laughter and conversations permeating the atmosphere. Isabel, resplendent in a shimmering silver gown, greeted them with practiced smiles and enthusiastic welcomes. Nicholas remained by her side, a silent spectator, feeling like a puppet in her elaborate performance. He watched as servers weaved through the throng, offering trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. He noticed Mrs. Higgins, looking flustered and overwhelmed, struggling to fulfill the demands of the caterers. He couldn't dispel the sensation that something was fundamentally amiss, that a crucial element of Deo was absent. Later, as the music swelled and the dancing commenced, he absconded from the party, drawn by an irresistible impulse. He found himself standing before Mabel's door, his hand hovering over the weathered wooden panel. He inhaled deeply and knocked gently. There was a moment of quiet, then the door swung inward. Mabel stood there, dressed in her simple, everyday attire. Her eyes were reddened, but her gaze remained firm. "Nicholas," she said softly. "Mabel, I need to speak with you." She hesitated momentarily, then stepped back, inviting him inside. The room was small and modestly furnished, yet it radiated a warmth and familiarity that was lacking in the rest of the house. He observed a framed photograph on the nightstand, a picture of him as a young child, standing alongside Mabel in the garden. "I am so sorry, Mabel," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I have been a fool. I allowed her to treat you this way." Mabel remained silent, but her eyes softened slightly. "It ends now, Mabel," he continued, his voice gaining strength. I promise you it ends now. He looked at her, his heart filled with a mixture of guilt, remorse, and a newfound resolve. He knew that he had a long journey ahead to earn her forgiveness, but he was prepared to begin. He was ready to fight for Deo, for his family's heritage, and for the woman who had always been his true mother. The party surged onward, oblivious to the quiet rebellion brewing within Mabel's small room. Hidden tears. The clamor of the Midsummer Night's Dream revelry vibrated through Deo's aged stones, each pulse a sharp jab at Mabel's weary soul. Though she sought no audience, the echoes of merriment and clinking crystal pursued her even to the vast kitchen. Her usual solace now felt like confinement. She lingered by the dormant aga, its usual warmth absent, a time-worn mug warming her hands. Forgotten tea cooled within. The lavender sachet, a constant companion in her apron, offered no balm. Tonight, its fragrance seemed a cruel jest, recalling peaceful mornings of baking and radio melodies, a life before the sparkle, the din, and Isabel. Mabel's eyelids pressed shut, etching the vision of Isabel, radiant in her shimmering gown, amidst a coterie of chattering guests, onto her inner eye. She'd striven to fit in, truly she had. Smiles offered, canapes presented, inquiries about the estate met with patient replies. Yet it consistently fell short, never quite aligning. She was a wraith in her own domain, a vestige of a bygone era, tolerated at best, routinely unseen. 37 years. Over 3 decades dedicated to this sanctuary, to this lineage. She'd arrived a tenderfoot, fresh-faced, and barely out of girlhood, straight from the hamlet. Mrs. Deo, Nicholas's grandmother, had embraced her, imparting her wisdom of housewifery and familial devotion. She'd witnessed Nicholas blossom from a rambunctious boy into the kind, gentle soul he was, or at least the man he had been. She recalled his youth, permanently adorned with earthy stains, presenting her with wildflowers plucked from the field. He'd perch at the kitchen table, legs swaying, enthralling her with sagas of dragons, knights, and daring exploits. She'd mend his garments, whip up his favored dessert, truly listening to every utterance. He'd always possessed a tender spirit. Now, he seemed adrift, lost within a sea of opulence and aspiration, oblivious to the pain he inflicted, or perhaps aware, yet indifferent to ceasing it. The thought stung like a wasp, more acutely than any of Isabel's subtle barbs. A tear slid free, tracing a lonely route down her lined cheek. She swiped it away, an ineffectual attempt to staunch the flow. More cascaded, silent and unstoppable, each attesting to years of quiet sacrifice, of steadfast fealty, now seemingly without worth. She contemplated the countless hours spent burnishing silver, dusting relics, nurturing the gardens. Each endeavor an act of devotion, an homage to the Deo legacy, to the history permeating the edifice. Isabel deemed it all clutter, obsolete foolishness, yearning to excise Deo's soul, supplanting it with something sleek, modern, devoid. A floorboard groaned behind her. Mabel hastily dabbed at her face with her apron, hoping to mask her distress. Futile. Nicholas filled the doorway, his countenance etched with care. The party's music, momentarily muted, remained a dull drone beyond the heavy oak. He appeared misplaced in his formal attire, like a visitor stumbling into the wrong chamber. "Mabel," he questioned softly, his voice barely cutting through the ambient din, "are you all right?" She averted her gaze, feigning busyness with the teapot, pretending to replenish her already brimming mug. "Just a touch weary, Mr. Nicholas," she murmured, reverting to a formality long abandoned. It felt like armor, a means of keeping him at bay. He edged closer, his gaze examining her face, seeking truth. He discerned it, naturally. He'd always possessed the knack for reading her. "Don't deceive me, Mabel," he urged, his tone mirroring her own weariness. "I observed you retreat." She exhaled, the fight ebbing away. What purpose did it serve? Understanding would elude him. Isabel's allure, her drive, her inexplicable influence had blinded him. "It's simply overwhelming, Mr. Nicholas," she confessed, her voice wavering. "The commotion, the throngs, it scarcely feels like Deo anymore, does it?" Silence. He was acutely aware of her accuracy. "I merely feel superfluous," she confessed, the words a whisper swallowed by the kitchen's volume. "As if I no longer belong." He winced as though struck. His hand reached, faltering, unsure whether to bridge the space. "That's untrue, Mabel," he asserted, his voice thick with sentiment. "You belong here more than any other." Hollow words, even to his own hearing. He hadn't acted as if she belonged. He'd remained a passive observer as Isabel eroded her dignity, her self-esteem. He'd prioritized his own ease, his aversion to confrontation, over her well-being. Mabel finally lifted her gaze, her eyes reflecting a profound disappointment that knifed him. Not rage, not spite, but a deep sense of disillusionment. The gaze of someone who had offered everything, only to be met with neglect. "Then why, Mr. Nicholas," she barely voiced, "why do you permit her to treat me thus?" The query hung, weighty and accusing. He offered no retort, averting his gaze, consumed by shame. He had failed her, betrayed her confidence, allowed the woman he vowed to cherish to inflict pain upon the woman who nurtured him. He yearned to atone, to clarify, to pledge change. But the words died in his throat. He was ensnared, torn between fealty to Mabel and his obsession with Isabel. He understood, in that instant, that continued silence was untenable. He couldn't persist as a bystander, watching Isabel dismantle everything precious. A choice was inevitable. Deep down, the choice had already been decided. The party's music swelled, its careless merriment a taunt. He inhaled deeply, the lavender scent filling his lungs, a reminder of the quiet resilience and unwavering devotion Mabel embodied. "I'm going to rectify this, Mabel," he declared, his voice resolute. "I vow, I'm going to rectify this." The means and the timing remained unknown, yet the necessity compelled him. For Mabel, for Deo, for his own integrity. False accusations. The orchestra surged, a violin-driven current sweeping across the throng assembled on the Deo's immaculate lawns. Champagne flutes winked like distant nebulae, and affected laughter mingled in the air, the soundtrack to Isabel's curated guest list. Nicholas, balancing a tray of appetizers, felt the familiar creep of discomfort in his stomach. The spectacle was undeniable, a monument to Isabel's meticulous nature, yet fundamentally empty. He searched the assembly for Mabel, a beacon of steadiness in his life. He spotted her near the terrace edge, back rigid as she oversaw a young server replenishing a warming dish. She seemed diminished against the backdrop of extravagant display. He began to move toward her when chaos intervened. A stout gentleman in an aggressively patterned suit, absorbed in a lively conversation, blundered backward, colliding squarely with a table groaning under the weight of miniature quiches and savory pastries. The structure teetered, then collapsed, unleashing an avalanche of food and shattered china onto the pristine paving stones. A ripple of gasps spread through the crowd, followed by a heavy silence. Nicholas gut clenched. He anticipated what was coming. Isabel materialized instantly, her face a frozen mask of contained rage. Her laser focus locked onto Mabel. "Mabel!" The word, amplified by the sudden hush, sliced through the air like a fractured mirror. "What is the meaning of this debacle? How could you permit such a thing?" Mabel, composure unshaken despite her pallor, stepped forward. "Madam, it was a mere accident." The gentleman lost his footing. "An accident?" Isabel's tone dripped with scorn. "Everything defaults to accident, where you're concerned, isn't it? A casual accident that the silver lacks its customary gleam, an accident that the floral arrangements are so uninspired, an accident that my esteemed guests are now adorned with salmon mousse." A wave of anger swelled within Nicholas, a dormant flame threatening to erupt. He started to intercede, but Isabel's icy glare silenced him. He remained trapped, paralyzed by years of ingrained deference. The embarrassed gentleman, face now crimson, stammered an apology. "My sincerest regrets, madam. Entirely my misjudgment." Isabel waved him off dismissively. "Naturally, the fault is yours. However, it falls to Mabel to preempt such occurrences. Her attention should have been more focused. Really, Mabel, after all these years, one would have thought you'd possess the foresight to anticipate these things." The raw humiliation in Mabel's eyes was plain. Shoulders squared, she endured Isabel's scathing critique, her quiet dignity only highlighting the inherent injustice. The other attendees, sensing the rising tension, shifted nervously, conversations fading into awkward murmurs. Nicholas watched, stomach twisting with shame. He noticed Mrs. Abernathy, notorious for her gossip, nudge her companion and whisper something behind a discreetly raised hand. He observed Mr. Davies, a prominent banker, avert his gaze, feigning fascination with a distant piece of statuary. The tableau was a study in social cruelty, and he remained a powerless spectator. "Perhaps," Mabel ventured, voice barely audible, "if the terrace wasn't cluttered with so many recent additions, it wouldn't be quite so congested." She subtly indicated the elaborate ice, sculpture, and the overflowing displays of flowers that Isabel had insisted upon. Isabel's eyes narrowed to slits. "Are you implying this is my responsibility?" "I am merely observing a fact, madam," Mabel countered, her voice still measured, but containing a hint of steel. "Insolence!" Isabel hissed, her controlled fury momentarily cracking. "Utter insolence! You will remedy this mess immediately, and furthermore, ensure nothing of this nature occurs. Do you comprehend?" Mabel gave a slight nod of her head. "Yes, madam." Isabel spun away from Mabel, turning to address the assembly, her voice abruptly bright and artificially cheerful. "Terribly sorry for that, everyone. A minor incident. Please do continue enjoying yourselves. The champagne is perfectly palatable." As Isabel steered the conversation back to its shallow course, Nicholas watched Mabel begin the task of gathering the scattered debris. Her motions were unhurried and precise, her face reflecting a sorrow that resonated deeply within him. He noticed the tremor in her hands as she picked up a fragment of shattered porcelain, and the observation struck him like a physical blow. He could tolerate it no longer. He pushed through the crowd, disregarding the curious glances and hushed comments. He reached Mabel just as she stooped to collect a particularly large shard. "Mabel," he said, his voice hushed and insistent. "Allow me to help." Mabel glanced up, her eyes revealing a mix of surprise and an emotion he couldn't quite classify, possibly disappointment. "There's no need, Master Nicholas," she replied softly. "I can manage perfectly well." "No," he insisted, taking the shard from her grasp. "You shouldn't have to just manage. This is inherently wrong." He surveyed the glittering throng, their faces a study in detachment. He gazed at Isabel, her back toward him, still holding court with her coterie of admirers. And he understood, with a clarity that startled even him, that he could no longer stand idly by. He inhaled deeply and straightened his spine. The ember of anger within him had finally flared, consuming years of entrenched passivity. He was finished being a bystander. "Isabel," he called out, his voice louder now, cutting through the superficial drone. Isabel turned, a flicker of annoyance on her face. "Yes, darling." Nicholas approached her, his gaze direct. "Isabel," he stated, his voice firm and unwavering, "you will apologize to Mabel." Speaking up. The aftermath of Nicholas's curt command descended like a suffocating shroud, denser than the sultry summer air. A ripple of unease spread. Champagne flutes froze mid-ascent to crimson-glossed lips, and the string quartet's melody fractured, their bows poised like startled birds. Isabel's carefully arched brows ascended a fraction, the painted curve of her mouth fissuring like sun-baked clay. "Nicholas, darling," she purred, a venomous sweetness coating her words. "Are you quite well? You appear agitated." He dismissed the veiled jab. Distraction was a luxury he couldn't afford. His focus remained riveted on the raw distress etched in Mabel's face, a wound he'd negligently allowed to fester. He recalled years of steadfast devotion, countless acts of unspoken kindness, the quiet dignity with which she'd absorbed Isabel's relentless needling. A wave of self-disgust washed over him. "Isabel, enough," he stated, his tone firmer, infused with a resolve he hadn't known he possessed. "Apologize to Mabel." A collective intake of breath swept through the assembled guests. Conversations ceased, replaced by the whisper of taffeta and the chime of ice against crystal. He felt the collective scrutiny, the judgment simmering beneath polite veneers, the barely suppressed glee at witnessing a domestic drama amongst the privileged. It was inconsequential. Isabel responded with a sharp, mirthless laugh. Apologize? To her? For what precisely? For tidying up after herself? For consistent disrespect, Nicholas countered, his voice gaining volume despite his efforts at composure. For relentless condescension and unkindness. For making her feel like an outsider in her own dwelling. He detected a flicker of surprise in Isabel's eyes, swiftly concealed by an icy rage. "Nicholas, really, don't be preposterous. Mabel understands her station." The words hung in the air, barbed and cruel. A sudden blaze of anger coursed through Nicholas, a sensation both potent and unfamiliar. Her station? She belongs here, Isabel. This is as much her home as mine. She practically raised me within these walls. He indicated with a sweeping gesture the manicured lawns, the twinkling lights, the assembled throng. She embodies more familial connection than half these people. He turned towards Mabel, standing silently near the patio's edge, shoulders square, her gaze fixed on some far-off point. He noticed a tremor in her hands, poorly disguised. He crossed the space to her, the eyes of the gathering following his every stride. "Mabel," he began, his voice softening, imbued with a sincerity that sliced through the artificiality of the evening. "I'm deeply sorry. I should have intervened long before now. Isabel's conduct has been indefensible, and I permitted it to continue. I was wrong." He reached for her hand, surprised by its delicate slenderness. He met her gaze and perceived not resentment, but a bottomless well of sadness. "You don't need to do this, Nicholas," she murmured, her voice a husky whisper. "Not on my account." He offered her hand a gentle squeeze. "I'm doing it for myself, Mabel, as well as for you. You deserve respect, and you deserve compassion." He pivoted back towards Isabel, his expression hardening. "And Isabel, if you are incapable of extending that to her, then perhaps you are the one who is misplaced." The carefully constructed mask of composure on Isabel's face disintegrated, revealing the raw, seething fury underneath. "How dare you address me in such a manner? Before these guests? I am your wife, and I am a Deo," Nicholas responded, his voice resonating with newfound conviction. "And this is my residence, and Mabel is intrinsic to this residence. You will treat her with respect, or you will leave." The silence resumed, thicker, more oppressive than before. He could feel the weight of 100 stares burning into him, the unspoken critiques, the murmured exchanges. He remained unmoved. He had, at long last, found his voice. He had finally defended the woman who had been a constant presence in his life, the woman who had offered him unconditional affection, the woman he had carelessly allowed to suffer. A smattering of guests began to whisper amongst themselves, while others, visibly uncomfortable, offered hasty excuses and began to disperse. The string quartet, sensing the seismic shift in atmosphere, silently dismantled their instruments and retreated into the house. Isabel glared at him, her eyes blazing with fury. She opened her mouth to retort, then reconsidered. Instead, she spun on her heel and marched towards the house, her stilettos striking the stone patio with sharp, staccato clicks. Nicholas watched her depart, a strange cocktail of relief and apprehension swirling within him. He had, at last, stood his ground, but he knew this was merely the opening salvo. The battle lines had been drawn, and the future remained uncertain. He turned back to Mabel, who regarded him with a mixture of surprise and concern. He offered a forced smile. "Are you all right?" he inquired. She offered a slow nod. "I am now," she replied softly. "Thank you, Nicholas." He squeezed her hand again. This should have happened a long time ago. His gaze swept over the remnants of the ruined evening, the forgotten glasses, the drooping flower arrangements, the hushed murmurs. The enchantment of the evening had been obliterated, replaced by a palpable tension. He was aware that the status quo had been irrevocably altered. He drew a deep breath. It was time to confront the repercussions of his decisions. It was time to begin rebuilding what had been fractured. It was time to reclaim his residence and his very existence. He focused on Mabel and said, "I believe it's time to conclude this evening." Together, they moved towards the house, leaving the debris of the party behind. As they walked, Nicholas experienced a sense of purpose that had eluded him for years. He had finally discovered his voice, and he was resolved to wield it to safeguard what truly mattered. Unraveling. The hush after Nicholas's declaration was palpable. The assembled company seemingly turned to statuary. A solitary chime echoed, a fork striking the china of a fallen plate, a brittle counterpoint to the frozen tableau. Isabel's complexion, moments ago blooming with the flush of wine and social conquest, now bleached, her makeup stark against the sudden pallor. "Nicholas," she breathed, a venomous whisper, "what do you imagine you're accomplishing?" His gaze held hers, the spark of defiance within undiminished. An unfamiliar serenity washed over him, a liberation unknown for years. "I'm acknowledging reality, Isabel. Mabel deserves dignity, and she will have it." Her manicured hands curled into tight knots. "Dignity? For hired help? You're humiliating me before our entire circle." Her voice scaled upward, the delicate veneer of sophistication fracturing. "Mabel is far more than hired help," Nicholas retorted, his tone resolute yet measured. "She is family." A short, mirthless sound escaped her, a brittle laugh. "Family? Don't be absurd, Nicholas. She's compensated for her presence. That's the extent of it." He shifted slightly toward Mabel, who remained rigidly by the sideboard, her face a canvas of sorrow overlaid with weary resignation. "She essentially raised me, Isabel, while my parents were otherwise engaged. She was the one who applied bandages to my childhood scrapes, who spun stories at bedtime, who instilled in me the fundamentals of morality. She embodies motherhood in a way my own never did." The atmosphere vibrated with unspoken truths, the burden of years of simmering resentment aimed at his detached parents, and the profound, enduring affection he harbored for Mabel. He glimpsed a fleeting surprise in Mabel's expression, quickly masked, but he registered its presence. Isabel's eyes widened, a poisonous light igniting within their depths. "So this is the crux of it? You're choosing her over me? Over your wife?" He delayed his response, the question hanging like a suspended blade. His gaze traveled from Isabel's enraged visage to Mabel's stoic bearing, an internal conflict raging. Allegiance versus duty, affection versus expediency. His life had been a tapestry woven with threads of appeasement, of conflict avoidance. But at this juncture, the path was clear. "I'm not prioritizing one over the other, Isabel," he stated finally, his voice imbued with a weariness that surprised even himself. "I'm simply affirming where my obligations lie, and they reside with those who have demonstrably earned them." Her face contorted with fury. "You ungrateful! After everything I've contributed, the connections I've cultivated, the opportunities I've unlocked, connections financed with my inheritance." Nicholas shot back, the words tinged with bitterness. "Opportunities one never solicited." "This is preposterous," she hissed, pivoting to address the assembled guests, seeking their validation. But they remained mute, shifting in their seats, avoiding his gaze. They perceived the power dynamic shifting, the carefully maintained social ecosystem collapsing. "I'm mortified that you would demean me in this manner," she pressed on, her voice quivering with outrage. "Before everyone. And you felt no compunction about demeaning Mabel? Nicholas countered, his gaze unwavering. She gasped as if physically struck. That's different. She's merely staff. No, Isabel, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. It's not different. It's wrong, and I will no longer tolerate it. Isabel stared at him, her expression a study in disbelief. She had always perceived him as pliable, weak-willed, easily manipulated. But now, she confronted a transformed man, one possessing resolve, possessing a backbone. And she loathed him for it. Fine, she spat, her voice laced with venom. If that's the state of affairs, I'm departing. A collective intake of breath swept through the room. Departing? Nicholas echoed, a flicker of uncertainty betraying his composure. Yes, departing, she reiterated, her eyes blazing with cold fire. I will not remain in this mausoleum for another instant. And I certainly will not remain wedded to a man who values his servant above his spouse. She executed a sharp turn and swept toward the exit, her silk gown billowing around her like gathering thunderclouds. She paused at the threshold, pivoting to face Nicholas, her eyes brimming with a calculating, icy fury. You'll rue this, Nicholas, she breathed, her voice barely audible. You'll rue this more profoundly than you can possibly conceive. And with that pronouncement, she vanished. The ensuing silence was profound. The guests remained rigid, unsure of their roles, of their words. Nicholas remained motionless, watching the empty doorway, the weight of his decision settling upon his shoulders. He had crossed an irreversible threshold. He glanced towards Mabel, who was now subtly removing the scattered silverware, her expression inscrutable. He felt the urge to approach her, to express remorse for his past passivity, to convey gratitude for her steadfast loyalty. But he restrained himself. Not yet. He required time to process, to fully comprehend the ramifications of the events that had transpired. His marriage was, in all probability, irrevocably shattered. His social standing lay in ruins. His life had undergone a fundamental transformation. Yet, as he observed Mabel, a subtle, almost imperceptible smile gracing her lips, he understood that he had, at long last, acted with integrity. He had finally championed his convictions, and that realization, he concluded, outweighed all other considerations. Departure. The bedroom door slammed, the sound of detonation in the echoing chambers of the ancient house, effectively ending their dispute. Nicholas remained immobile, the resonant boom landing like a solid punch. He recognized the prelude. The percussive rhythm of drawers yanked open and slammed shut, the whisper of silk against silk, a grim choreography he'd come to anticipate too well during their fractured union. Isabel was leaving. He pushed the portal inward, girding himself. Once a haven of gentle light and soothing tones, the room now pulsed with tightly leashed fury. Garments were being attacked and crammed into luggage, footwear aligned with parade ground precision, jewels cast with seeming indifference into velvet receptacles. Silhouette rigid against the sun's glare, Isabel presented her back to him. Isabel, he ventured, his voice unsteady. No response. Don't, she clipped, her tone as cutting as fractured crystal. Just don't. He moved further inward, his gaze encompassing the meticulously arranged turmoil. His eye caught the small, framed reminder of their wedding day, lying prone on the nightstand. A wave of near grief resonated within him. Not for her, precisely, but for the phantom of once-held optimism. "Where will you go?" he inquired, the question feeling ludicrously inadequate given the seismic shift underway. "Does it signify?" she countered, swiveling at last to confront him, her eyes reflecting suppressed tears and smoldering ire. "Perhaps a return to Paris. Or Rome. Anywhere removed from this crypt." She motioned around, her lip curling with disdain. "And most definitely anywhere distant from you." He recoiled inwardly. Her words were calibrated for maximum damage. He'd earned them, he understood. His passivity, his tacit acceptance of her treatment of Mabel, had laid the groundwork for this severance. Prioritizing a semblance of calm over principle, he was now facing the fallout. I, I realize, he mumbled, the words sounding vapid even to his own ears. Isabel's laugh was a brittle, rasping exhalation devoid of joy. Do you, Nicholas? Do you grasp even the simplest concept? You're pitiable. A marionette, manipulated by that creature. The final word was spat like venom, that he couldn't concede. Mabel has only ever cared for this household. For me, So. Cared? She's stifling you, Nicholas, tethering you to the past with her obsolete notions and her self-effacement. Isabel's face burned crimson, her respiration labored. She's an artifact, a museum piece. And you're permitting her to run your existence. He longed to dispute, to champion Mabel, to articulate the profound bond connecting them, but the arguments choked in his throat. Isabel wouldn't begin to comprehend. Her realm consisted of fleeting fads and surface relationships, a world where devotion was a liability and tradition an inconvenience. Resuming her task, her movements were sharp and uncontrolled. The quiet stretched, heavy with unspoken recriminations and suppressed animosity. He observed her, a peculiar cocktail of resentment, dejection, and burgeoning freedom churning within him. Finally, with a decisive click, the last valise was secured. Done, she stated, her voice leveled. Passing him, her shoulder grazed his. He reached out, instinctively, to impede her, but she recoiled. Don't touch me, she spat, disgust coating the words. His hand fell limp. At the threshold, she paused, her back still presented. I arrived here, believing I could reshape you, Nicholas. Modernize you. Drag you kicking and screaming into the 21st century. Another mirthless chuckle escaped her. I was mistaken. You're too deeply rooted in the past, too blinded by sentiment. You'll simply wither away here, amidst the dust and the phantoms, a forgotten relic yourself. Turning then, her eyes were flinty and unforgiving. I pity you, Nicholas. I truly do. With that, she was gone. He remained there, absorbing the click of her heels against the stone, tracing her progress down the corridor. Then, the snap of the front door yielding and closing, followed by the deep thrum of the engine receding into the distance. The ensuing quiet was immense, almost unbearable. The quiet of a crypt, and yet equally the quiet of freshly cleared ground, a pristine surface awaiting the brush. Approaching the window, he tracked the ebony silhouette of her car, shrinking down the serpentine driveway, leaving only a plume of dispersed particles in its wake. He felt strangely disconnected, as though witnessing a stage drama in which his part was minimal. Then, the magnitude of the moment crashed down. Isabel had left. His marriage was over. He was alone in Deo, the weight of generations pressing upon him. Turning from the window, he re-entered the bedroom. His gaze swept across discarded garments, gaping luggage, the overturned photograph. It was a tableau of devastation, a testament to the unraveling of their connection. He retrieved the picture, his eyes drawn to it. He and Isabel, youthful and hopeful, grinning for the lens. He scarcely recognized the man staring back. So eager to please, so driven to meet her expectations. He'd forfeited himself in the process, betraying his values and those he cherished most. He righted the frame, carefully restoring it to its place, face up this time. He owed it to himself and to Mabel to recollect who he was and what he championed. With squared shoulders, he exited the room, leaving the disarray behind. He faced a long path ahead, a path toward redemption and reconciliation. But for the first time in years, a flicker of promise ignited within him. Apologies and forgiveness. The mansion loomed, its vastness amplified by the clicking echo of his shoes against the polished stone. He skirted the drawing room, the ghost of Isabel's perfume a lingering accusation. Drawn instead to the solace of the gardens, childhood escapes bloomed in his memory. His gaze swept over the vibrant flower beds, their joyful hues a painful counterpoint to the gloom in his soul. Then he noticed her, Mabel, hunched by the rose bushes, her frame convulsing. Those shadows veiled her face in the fading light. The slump of her shoulders betrayed her silent grief. He'd never witnessed Mabel weep, not even at Mr. Deo's passing. She'd always been Deo's unshakable foundation, its quiet strength. He approached gently, the crunch of gravel soft underfoot. Mabel, her shoulders only trembled harder. Kneeling, he felt the earth's chill seep through his trousers. The cloying sweetness of roses, typically a source of joy, now felt like a brand of shame. Mabel, I am truly sorry. The words felt hollow, a meager offering for the weeks of indignity she'd endured. He wanted to retract them, replace them with something of substance, but his throat clenched, silencing him. Slowly, she straightened, brushing tears with a roughened hand. Her face was a canvas of sorrow, yet devoid of animosity, her gaze reflecting only weary acceptance. It's all right, Nicholas. But it wasn't. He'd permitted Isabel's appalling behavior, a silent accomplice to the erosion of Mabel's spirit. He'd prioritized his wife over the woman who had nurtured him, offered unconditional devotion. This betrayal weighed on him, a stone in his chest. No, it's far from all right, Mabel. I should have intervened. I should have stopped her. My weakness, it was unforgivable. The admission stung, exposing his flaws, but he craved her understanding, her absolution. Mabel sighed, the sound like wind whispering through leaves. Isabel lacked comprehension. She never understood Deo, or you, or me. That offers no justification, he countered, his tone sharpening. I should have defended you. You've always been family, Mabel. More so than anyone. He reached out, his hand hovering hesitantly before enclosing hers. Her skin, textured by years of dedication to the gardens, offered a surprising warmth. I know you're inherently good, Nicholas, she replied softly, her gaze fixed on a striking crimson rose amid the verdant foliage. You were trapped. These things, they're rarely simple. He tightened his grip, a wave of relief washing over him. But I wounded you, Mabel, and for that, I'll carry this burden. Hush now, she soothed, a gentle smile playing on her lips. Such pronouncements aren't needed. I've weathered worse, you know. This was merely a squall, and squalls always subside. He truly looked at her, seeing the resilience etched in her features, the unwavering fortitude that defined her. He felt undeserving, yet utterly reliant on her forgiveness. Can you possibly forgive me, Mabel, for my blindness, my cowardice? She inverted her hand, interlacing her fingers with his. There's nothing to pardon, Nicholas. You're home again. That's the heart of the matter. He leaned close, resting his forehead gently against her shoulder. The earthy scent of roses enveloped him, a comforting, grounding balm. Closing his eyes, he absorbed her warmth, the quiet strength emanating from her. Thank you, Mabel, he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you for everything. They remained there for a long time, the silence punctuated by the hum of bees and distant birdsong. The sun descended further, casting long, dramatic shadows across the manicured lawn. Finally standing, he felt lighter, as if a burden had been shed. He knew that scars would remain, but he had begun the journey toward healing, rebuilding the life he had nearly forfeited. He extended his hand, assisting Mabel to her feet. Together, they turned toward the house, illuminated by the dying embers of daylight. He was uncertain of what awaited, but knew he wouldn't face it in isolation. He had Mabel, and he had Deo, and that, he realized, was enough. Reaching the back door, Mabel paused, turning towards him, a glint of mischief in her eyes. You know, she remarked, the roses desperately need deadheading, and an extra pair of hands would be welcome. A genuine smile bloomed on his face for the first time in weeks. Consider it done, Mabel. Consider it done. Rebuilding together. The rose fragrance, lingering from Mabel's earlier distress, now possessed a different character. No longer merely floral, it carried the undertones of remorse, the airy relief of absolution, and a tentative promise of brighter horizons. Nicholas felt a curious blend of enervation and nascent vigor. He had confronted the specters of his past, or at least admitted their presence. The formidable task of banishing them now loomed. He cleared his throat, the sound unusually prominent in the sudden quiet. "Mabel," he started, his voice still husky. "Isabel, she's gone. I see now that I allowed her to warp things, to distort our lives in ways that were profoundly wrong." He waved a hand towards the house, its severe facade softened by the encroaching gloaming. "This place, it needs redemption, not through Isabel's vision, but authentically." Mabel's eyes, though still rimmed with tears, held a glint of wary expectation. "Redemption, Mr. Nicholas?" he affirmed with a nod, drawing resolve from her gaze. "Yes, I want to undo some of the damage, the frigid changes she imposed, restore some of the warmth, the very heart of Deo." He paused, searching for the right words. "And I cannot accomplish this alone, Mabel. Your assistance is essential." Mabel's brows arched, a flicker of surprise momentarily eclipsing her sadness. "My help, Mr. Nicholas?" "Yes, you understand this house, this family, more intimately than anyone. You possess the knowledge of what resonates, what feels true. Isabel, she expunged so much of that. The subtle details, the personal touches, the very essence of Deo." He raked a hand through his hair, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility descend. Only this time, it didn't crush him. Instead, it felt purposeful. "I want to resurrect some of that with you, if you're willing." A slow smile blossomed on Mabel's face, etching lines around her eyes, a soothing balm that permeated his wounded spirit. "Oh, Mr. Nicholas," she murmured, "I hardly know what to say." "Say you'll aid me," he implored, a thread of desperation lacing his tone. "Say you'll help me breathe life back into Deo." "Of course I will," she affirmed, her voice steady and resolute. "This house, it's in my very marrow, just as it is in yours. I would be honored to assist you in returning it to its former grandeur." A wave of relief washed over him, so potent it nearly buckled his knees. "Thank you, Mabel. Thank you. And I assure you, I pledge, I will never permit anyone to treat you with such disrespect again. Never. Your family, Mabel. More family than she ever was." Mabel reached out and gave his hand a gentle squeeze. "I know that, Mr. Nicholas. I have always known that." A renewed sense of determination coursed through him. He would no longer stand idly by as events unfolded. He would actively craft his life, his sanctuary, his future. "Right," he declared, clapping his hands together. "Right then, where shall we begin?" Mabel chuckled, a bright, lilting sound. "Well, Mr. Nicholas, perhaps we should commence with the drawing room. That glacial white, it has never felt right, not since you were a boy playing soldiers on that Persian carpet." "The Persian rug!" Nicholas exclaimed, his eyes igniting. "I remember that rug. Isabel had it, relegated it to storage. Claimed it was too busy. Busy?" Mabel scoffed, with a dismissive snort. "It was magnificent, teeming with life and color. It narrated tales." "Precisely." He felt a surge of exhilaration, a genuine enthusiasm he hadn't felt in years. "We'll retrieve it. We'll restore it to its rightful place. And then we shall select warmer hues for the walls. Something that complements the rug, something that feels inviting." They moved towards the house, their steps now lighter, their shoulders relieved of the burden of unspoken resentments. As they reached the entrance, Nicholas paused, placing a hand on Mabel's arm. "And Mabel," he stated, his voice earnest and sincere, "I meant what I said about protecting you. You need never fear mistreatment here again. I won't allow it. You have my word." Mabel smiled, her eyes glistening with suppressed tears. "Thank you, Mr. Nicholas. That means more to me than words can express." Inside, the drawing room seemed to glare, its stark pallor a blatant reminder of Isabel's influence. But as Nicholas surveyed the space, he no longer saw a room that demanded demolition and modernization. He perceived a blank canvas, a space yearning to be imbued with memories, with warmth, with vitality. "The rug first," he announced, his voice resonating with newfound conviction. "Let's return that rug to its rightful home." Mabel nodded, her eyes dancing with anticipation. "I know exactly where they stashed it. Up in the attic, swathed in dust sheets." Together, they ascended the creaking staircase to the attic, the air growing progressively cooler and mustier with each step. The attic was a trove of forgotten heirlooms, a chronicle of the Deo family's rich and venerable history. As they peeled back the dust sheets from the rug, its radiant tones seemed to erupt forth, a vibrant splash of color against the otherwise somber backdrop. "There it is," Nicholas whispered, tracing the intricate patterns with his fingertips. "It's even more stunning than I recalled." "It's home," Mabel said softly, her voice thick with emotion. Unfurling the rug required considerable strength, but as they worked in unison, their movements synchronized, their conversation flowing effortlessly, Nicholas felt a bond with Mabel he hadn't realized he'd been lacking. It was more than just shared heritage, a mutual affection for Deo. It was a deeper connection, a shared respect forged in the crucible of hardship. At last, the rug was fully extended, its luxurious colors illuminating the dusty attic. They stepped back, admiring their accomplishment, a shared feeling of satisfaction enveloping them. "Now," Nicholas said, a playful sparkle in his eye, "how do we manage to get this Leviathan downstairs?" Mabel laughed, a genuine, hearty laugh that reverberated through the attic. "That, Mr. Nicholas, is indeed the question." As they began to brainstorm, their voices blending with the creaks and groans of the ancient house, Nicholas knew that this was merely the genesis. The journey ahead would be long and demanding. But with Mabel at his side, he felt confident that they could reconstruct Deo, brick by brick, memory by memory, until it was once more a haven overflowing with love, joy, and the enduring spirit of family. And this time, he would safeguard that spirit, cherish it, and ensure it was never again compromised. A new beginning. Beeswax and lemon balm perfumed the air, a far cry from Isabel's astringent cleansers. Sunlight poured through spotless windows, highlighting swirling dust motes in radiant beams. Nicholas, teetering on a ladder, delicately dusted the upper shelves as Mabel, armed with a chamois cloth and an affable smile, burnished the lower ones. A silent camaraderie enveloped them, a rhythm honed by years of shared history. "Mind yourself, Mr. Nicholas," Mabel cautioned, her voice a gentle ripple of concern. "Wouldn't want you taking a spill." A rusty chuckle escaped Nicholas. "At this altitude, Mabel, it's simply Nicholas. And fear not, though my bones creak a bit more these days, I haven't lost my sea legs entirely." He retrieved a faded, gold-lettered volume. "Behold, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Remember enacting every character when you read this aloud." Mabel's eyes crinkled with amusement. "Indeed, you were a dreadful Tom Sawyer, constantly up to no good. I dare say, some things are immutable." Nicholas descended, a sheepish grin spreading across his features. He offered her the book. "You always infused it with such life. You were the quintessential Aunt Polly." He paused, his gaze softening. "You were the best, everything, Mabel." A blush tinted Mabel's neck, a delicate rose blooming on her cheeks. "Now, Nicholas, hush with such flattery. I did what anyone decent would." "But that's precisely my point, Mabel," Nicholas countered, his tone earnest. "You transcend mere decency. You are family." He inwardly cringed. The word felt paltry, inadequate to convey the extent of his affection. They resumed their tasks, the atmosphere thick with unspoken sentiment. As the afternoon waned, the library's character underwent a metamorphosis. Isabel's sterile aesthetic gradually yielded to a warmth and vibrancy that echoed the room's heritage. A Persian rug, now prominently displayed, anchored the space, its riotous colors breathing vitality into the somber wood paneling. Later, nursing mugs of steaming tea in the kitchen, Nicholas basked in a tranquility absent for years. Mabel recounted a droll anecdote from his childhood, her eyes sparkling with mischief. He listened with profound attention, absorbing not just the words, but the emotions woven between them. And then you decided to paint Mrs. Higgins' prized roses azure. She was incensed, positively apoplectic. But you, dear heart, just stood there with your little brush, proclaiming that blue roses were infinitely superior. Nicholas roared with laughter, the sound unfettered and genuine. I'd completely forgotten that. I probably fancied myself some fledgling Michelangelo of floral design. Undoubtedly, Mabel chuckled, shaking her head. Always a dreamer, Mr. Nicholas. A dreamer with a mischievous streak. The laughter subsided, leaving a comfortable quiet in its wake. Nicholas studied Mabel, truly seeing her. The delicate tracery around her eyes narrated a life richly lived, a life devoted to others. Her hands, gnarled and strong, attested to years of diligent work and unwavering commitment. He felt an overwhelming surge of gratitude, so potent it brought a prickle to his eyes. "Mabel," he began, his voice husky with emotion. I don't know what I would have done without you, particularly these last few years. I was so blind, so consumed by everything. I let you down, Mabel. I truly did." Mabel reached across the table and gently clasped his hand. "Hush now, Nicholas. What's done is past. We can't reclaim the past, but we can sculpt the future." "And that's precisely what I intend, Mabel," Nicholas affirmed, his voice resolute. "This house, Deo, it transcends mere brick and mortar. It's a legacy. Our legacy. And I intend to rebuild it, shard by shard, memory by memory, with you at my side." He inhaled deeply, bracing himself for the momentous question. "Mabel, I realize I scarcely deserve it, but would you consider remaining here? With me? Indefinitely? Not as a caretaker, not as a servant, but as family. As the very heart of this house. As my family." Mabel's eyes widened, her face a canvas of surprise and incredulity. She withdrew her hand, her fingers trembling almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Nicholas? Nicholas, you needn't feel compelled to say such things. I'm delighted to aid you in restoring the house, but what, Mabel?" Nicholas pressed, anxiety threading his tone. "Don't you desire to stay? To be a part of this family?" Mabel lowered her gaze to her hands, her lips compressed into a thin line. After a prolonged, agonizing silence, she finally spoke. "Of course I long to stay, Nicholas. This house, it's my home as well. I've spent my entire life within these walls. But I wouldn't want you to feel beholden. I wouldn't want you to feel you're acting out of pity or compunction." Nicholas reached across the table and enveloped her hands in his grip firm and assuring. "Mabel, hear me. This isn't about obligation or pity or guilt. This is about love, Mabel. Pure, unalloyed love. You're the closest I've ever had to a mother. You have always been my steadfast support through good times and ill. You've imparted everything I know about kindness, compassion, and unwavering fidelity. And I crave your presence here, with me, for the remainder of our days. Please, Mabel, say yes." Tears welled in Mabel's eyes, blurring her vision. She gazed at Nicholas, her expression radiating a depth of emotion he had never witnessed before. She perceived the genuine affection in his eyes, the yearning for connection, the urgent need for absolution. And in that instant, she knew she couldn't deny him. "Yes, Nicholas," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "Yes, I'll stay. I'll stay with you always." A wave of cathartic relief washed over Nicholas, so profound it left him momentarily weakened. He squeezed Mabel's hands, his heart brimming with gratitude. He understood this was merely the dawn of a protracted and demanding journey, yet he also knew he wasn't navigating it alone. He had Mabel by his side, his bedrock, his guiding star. And together, they would resurrect Deo, not merely as a dwelling, but as a home. A home resonating with love, laughter, and the enduring puissance of family. He rose and circled the table, enfolding Mabel in a warm embrace. He held her close, burying his face in her soft, silver hair. "Thank you, Mabel," he whispered. "Thank you for everything." Mabel patted his back, her touch tender and reassuring. "You're welcome, Nicholas. You're welcome." As they stood there, bathed in the gentle glow of the kitchen, Nicholas realized he had finally found his way back home. He had strayed from the path for a time, blinded by ambition and seduced by shallow desires. But now, he was once more on the right course, a course paved with love, loyalty, and the unbreakable ties of family. And he knew, with unwavering certainty, that he would never falter again. He would cherish Mabel, he would honor her, and he would dedicate his life to transforming Deo into a sanctuary for them both. The house, previously a stark reminder of his past failings, now stood as a beacon of hope, a testament to the enduring strength of love and forgiveness. A new chapter had begun, and Nicholas was prepared to embrace it, with Mabel by his side every step of the way.